Hello and welcome to Business Daily from the BBC with me, Manuela Zaragoza. Coming up, how much should your employer know about the state of your health?
There's a health analytics company saying, hey, we can use your wellness data and we can predict which of your employees might be trying to get pregnant.
We'll hear about the collision between big data, health and privacy. And the doctor will see you now on a screen near you.
In some cases, you really need to see the doctor in the real world for them to touch and see and diagnose. And in some cases, you don't. About 50% of the time, it needs to be virtual and 50% of the time in the office.
That's all coming up in Business Daily from the BBC. For a while now, there's been a growing number of companies that refuse to hire smokers. In the US, these include Turner Broadcasting, owners of CNN, and Alaska Airlines. Outside the US, they include the World Health Organization. They argue that they're taking a valid interest in their employees' health. After all, in the US, employers cover their employees' health insurance costs, and smokers are just more expensive. Critics, though, argue it's an unethical breach of personal privacy. But now an increasing number of companies are not just providing health insurance cover, they're also asking employees to sign up to so-called wellness programs, which monitor and help them with their ongoing health. In a moment, we'll discuss the legal and ethical implications. But first, one such company is the oil giant Chevron, which runs wellness programs for its employees all over the world. So what does taking part in the company's wellness program involve? A question for Janice Davis-Street, who's Associate Manager for Health and Productivity at Chevron.
It might be involved in something as simple as recognizing your individual risk, stress, physical activity, and nutrition. Nutrition is a perfect example of the importance of that local tweaking, so to speak, because what kinds of recommendations that we might suggest in the U.S. would be very different from what we would suggest in Nigeria or in the Philippines. And so that allows the local teams to localize the program and make it fit for purpose according to whatever the cultural or environmental constraints might be in that location.
Are these all voluntary?
All of our programs are voluntary.
And who do you share this information with?
So we only share information on an aggregate level. So that information is used to share with our leaders so they kind of know what's going on with our programs. For example, even a specific business unit or location, we see that maybe there's high prevalence of dietary issues. We would maybe change our programming in that specific area to address nutrition. If in another location we see that physical inactivity is the highest, we'll focus on that in that area.
Your employees must think, though, about the privacy issues. How do you reassure them about that?
We go through a very intense privacy screen with all of our vendors.
Private vendors, what do you mean?
So we have external vendors who administer our programs. So, for example, we may work with a vendor's portal, and that vendor has to go through a very rigorous process for us to even use their product with our workforce.
But do employees ever raise the issue of privacy with you?
We've had employees raise it as an issue, and there's very clear language on the websites, on our websites around privacy, around the approaches and that we take towards privacy. And I would say that it's never been something that we've had that has been a huge issue, but it's always a question that we try to address head on by sharing what our approach to privacy is. All of that is always very clear in our frequently asked questions, as well as very clear in all of our employee websites.
That was Janice Davis-Street of Chevron. So where does the law stand on this sort of data collection on employees' health? Well, Jessica Roberts is Associate Professor of Law and Director of Health, Law and Policy at the Health and Law and Policy Institute at the University of Houston Law Center. She's been studying the matter, and she says that as long as companies bear the brunt of employees' health insurance costs, it's a complicated argument.
In the world of big data, employers are wanting more and more information, not just health related, about their employees to be able to assess their productivity as well as the costs that they create. And so there was a little flurry of controversy a couple months ago because, employers in the conjunction with their health insurance plans encourage employees to participate in these employee wellness programs. Over half of large employers in the U.S. have these programs, and these programs generate data. So oftentimes what will happen is you are at work and you get a form to fill out about your health history, and then you do some biometric screening, and then you are either encouraged to take classes, or some wellness programs even create targets that they want participants to meet. And all of this generates a ton of data, and you could actually reveal some pretty private information. And the thing that caused this little bit of controversy a few months ago is there's a health analytics company called Caslight that was trying to sell its services to employers and saying, hey, we can use your wellness data and we can predict who's at risk for any number of things, including diabetes, which is something that could be a costly condition. But we can also predict which of your employees might be trying to get pregnant. And so this was something where privacy experts were deeply concerned, because this is an area that's largely unregulated in the United States.
And that's what this is really about, isn't it? This is about privacy.
It's absolutely about privacy, because one of the things in my work that I've argued is if you don't have access to information, you can't use it to discriminate. And so if we limit employers' access to sensitive employee information, they can't then use that information to make an adverse employment decision down the line.
How do companies justify what they're doing, demanding this kind of information from employees and prospective employees?
Well, it's interesting. So there are at least two lines of argument that these employers use. The more employee-friendly argument that, we're your employer, we're invested in you, we care about your health, we want you to be healthier, right? And so there is an element of altruism there. But of course, these companies are also concerned.
You don't really believe in that altruism, though, do you? I think most people would probably struggle to believe in it.
Exactly. The companies are concerned about the bottom line. And like I said, they want to maximize employee productivity and minimize the costs. And so that is definitely one of the reasons that employers are interested in this data. And also recently, there was at least one company saying, hey, we can take all of this information about companies and the health of their employees, and we can create these health reports that we can then make available to shareholders and investors. And so that's pretty clearly about profitability. And the idea being, if I'm an investor, maybe I don't want to invest in a company where the employees are unhealthy or causing a substantial burden or something like that.
Are you fighting a kind of losing battle here? I mean, is this just the way that things are going now?
Hopefully not. I think that part of the reason we're seeing this happening is because it's relatively new technology, at least in the context of big data. And so we haven't regulated it yet because we don't really know how it behaves. And so I think when you hear these kinds of stories, that is something that hopefully inspires regulators to step in and say, okay, we need to take a closer look at this, and maybe this wild west of big data is something that needs a little more regulation and control.
If it isn't checked, this kind of, intrusive look into employees' health background and state of health, where does it lead?
I think if it goes